Hi everyone. Welcome to I believe this is week. Let me just confirm. Yes. So this is week 14 of our Webflow workshop series. Hi Doreen, welcome. And to anyone who is going to be watching the recording, hi to you guys as well. Since this is week 14, we are as usual just continuing with our Capstone project. So we are continuing with building out this website, which I got from Squarespace. So if we look at our progress in Webflow currently, we've completed the hero section, we've completed this intro section, we've completed this kind of grid section here, and last week we were finishing off with creating this section with drop downs. So for today, we're going to be just finishing up this section. I'm probably just going to tweak how much space the paragraph text takes. I think mine is a bit too small. And then we should be done with this section and we can move on to the final, I think it's just 1, 2, 3 sections. I think I mentioned in the beginning that we're also going to see if we can do like one other page and then publish a site. So 2 more weeks of this workshop left this week and next week, which should be enough time to get everything finished. And then next week, we'll also probably add in some interactions as well, complete the site. And then I can also show you guys, like if this were an actual client site, the whole process of making sure everything is good and ready before publishing. So going back to our list section here, I'm going to open this drop down menu. And here where it says, I'm going to select the maximum width container that I put my paragraph text in. And I'm
Hi
just going to,
Elsa,
hey Doreen, how are you?
I'm fine. Sorry, I can't see your screen.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for letting me know. Oh my God, I would have recorded the whole. Do. Okay, there you go. Should be able to see it now. So, sorry about that. Um, Let me quickly redo what I was saying. We are rebuilding this page. We are currently on this section, just one final change I need to make, and then we're gonna finish out the rest of this page. And then we'll see how we're doing on time, and maybe we'll be able to start on the second page I wanted to do. So going back to Webflow, I've selected the maximum width div that my paragraph text is in, and I'm going to increase the size because right now I think that it's a bit too short, a bit too narrow, sorry, in comparison to the example. The example kind of goes up until here. So we're gonna actually, instead of like tweaking it, we could tweak it or we could use another one. There's an extra large. Let's preview what the extra large. Okay, I think the extra large one is actually the size that we want. So we'll probably just go with that. Remember, these are all classes that came with our style guide. So I didn't set those up or anything. They're all there. That's why it's really useful to just use a style guide as a template because then you can get a lot of these default classes already set up for you. So we did it for,
Sorry again.
yeah, yeah.
I think I can't see it again. Maybe it's my network.
Stop. Why did it stop sharing? Can you see it now?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, okay. You let me know if it cuts out again.
Okay, okay.
So it should still be there, right? Okay. Let me also keep things here. Okay, so we are going to select our second list item and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select the maximum width and we're going to change that to extra large. And then we're going to select this third one here. We're going to select maximum width and then change it to the extra large. The other thing I want to do is I think I also want to increase the height for my text. I think my text, the lines are like close together in comparison to how the um, example is. So I'm not gonna do that here. I'm going to, you can see when it's orange, it's letting you know that this value is not coming from this class. It's coming from something else, basically. This value is coming from this class because it's the text size, hence why this class is called text size medium. But the height is coming from something else. So if I click this, it'll tell me, okay, this value is coming from the body. Because remember in the beginning, we selected our body and we set the font and we set the line height and we even set the default text size. So I'm going to go back to my body and I'm going to select the HTML tag for body. So now you can see here it's blue because this value is coming from, the body HTML tag. So instead of 1.4, I'm just going to make it 1.5. Then I'm going to preview and see if that works. I feel like 1.5 is pretty good. It still seems a bit close together, so I can even try making it like 1.6. And let me see. So 1.6, I think, looks more. We also have to keep in mind that is this the same font? Yeah, Helvetica and Gilda. This is okay. We're using Enter for the body font because I remember Helvetica wasn't one of the Google fonts or the default fonts we could use, and I didn't want to spend too much time adding custom fonts. So that's also partly why it looks a bit different because it's a different font. But I think 1.6 is kind of more realistic with what we wanted. So we're gonna keep the 1.6 line height, and then this section should be done. So now the next section, just so here what I just did is sometimes with the like padding bottom, padding vertical, once you like set it, so for example, in this case, I only wanted to add padding at the bottom here. I didn't want to add it anywhere else. But sometimes the classes don't work like you're supposed to. So you can even see here, I was wondering why does it feel like there's so much space here, even though I only added padding at the bottom. But if I look here, it's telling me that I've actually added padding everywhere. So easy to fix this, you just kind of set it to 0 where you don't need padding. So in this case, I don't need padding on the bottom, so it should go to 0. If I go to my other sections, in this case, I also used padding bottom. So once again, it should be 0. In this case, I used padding vertical. So it's supposed to be 8 rem on the top and the bottom. And I don't think I have padding on my hero section. So that's fine. So now that that's done, we'll move on to the next section, which is this CTA section with like book now. So let me confirm if this is like an image that okay, so I think the image is like a new image. So we're going to go in, click inspect so we can get what the image is. So we've selected the section. Now we're just finding where they might have put the image. Is it a background image or is it a, I think I saw it somewhere here. Maybe not. Um, Section content. Oh, and let me just give this more space so I can actually see what I'm doing. Okay, so this is the section that we're um in, I believe. Well, not this is the before section. So we want this section. So that's the section that we want. And I'm trying to figure out, is this image a background image? It does seem to be a background image, but finding the background image is now a whole, okay, this says section background. Might it be in here? Okay, so here is our image. Was a bit difficult to find, but we found it. Normally with like a lot of websites, it's actually not even that difficult to get the images. It's just this one. I don't know how Squarespace builds their sites. The images, they're a bit tricky sometimes. But usually you can just right click and save image, like for 90% of the images you find online, or you can just drag them. But if they are not appearing, that's when you have to go into inspect and find them that way, which can be tricky. So I'm just gonna, it looks like it's not centered anymore. So let me just refresh the page. Okay. So we're going to add our new section. We can actually duplicate an existing section if you're like tired of like constantly having to write and rewrite the similar things. And then we'll just remove the classes and rewrite them. So this section is going to be our CTA section. Padding global is going to be the same. For padding bottom, what we are going to add is, so this is going to be the padding within this section, right? So it's not just bottom, it's going to be top and bottom. And the space isn't that much compared to like the space we've been using, I think. So I'm going to remove padding bottom and instead put padding. Actually, the space might be the same as what we're using currently. It's a bit smaller. So let's say instead of padding, before it was extra huge, which is 8 rem. So in this case, I want padding vertical, and we'll say huge for now, and then we can adjust it. And once again, I just want to make sure that I remove the padding where I don't want it to be, which is on the left and the right. Now that that's done, I'm going to just delete what was in there before the component because that was just duplicated from this one. So I don't need any of this, so I'll delete it. And then for our CTA section itself, I'm going to select the section and then give it a background. So we'll choose cover because we want our image to cover the entire section. We want it to be centered. And then here, when choose image, we can drag and drop our image. So we just wait for our image to finish uploading. Okay, now with our image uploaded, we're just going to wait and see. Sometimes it's a case of, okay, there we go. Just needs a few minutes to actually show up. So in this case, actually seems like the image is like enlarged a bit compared to, because you can see that the ears are cropped out, the legs are cropped out. So it's not like 100%, 100%. So we can actually go in and on cover mode, you can't like adjust the width and the height because it just automatically by default sets to be 100%, 100%. But if you want to adjust the width and height, you can go to custom mode. Once again, make sure to center. And then here you can already see that it kind of looks zoomed in a bit more, but we can actually add in a specific, like maybe 120% or 150%. Let's try 150% and we'll see how that looks once we actually add our content. So we're gonna add in, there are two things here. There's this top row with like these text elements, and then there's this bottom row with like this heading and a book now button. So I'm going to select my container and I'm gonna add a CTA, a div that says CTA components. And then for this div, we're gonna give it flex and vertical. And there are two ways you can do this. You can either, because you want to create this spacing between these two rows, right? So you can either use, whether you're using flex or grid, and then you can just add a really big gap like 10 rem, and it can work that way. Or the way I like to do it is with these really big sections, like what we did for the hero section as well, is just give them a fixed height, right? So in this case, this component, it's not 100 VH, but it's pretty big. So we'll select the CTA component element and we'll just give it a height of, let's say 60 VH. So now automatically it enlarges the section according to that height. And if we preview, we can see, okay, is this long enough or do we need to make it longer? I think it could be a bit longer. So we're going to increase that to like 65. And then we're going to preview again. Um, and then we'll see how that is. I think that's probably not bad. Let me like just move this. Yeah, that's roughly kind of what we want. So we'll leave it as is. So with that selected, we are then going to change actually, before I do that, let me add the first top row of my elements, which is where these texts are going to be. So I'll just call this CTA top row, and I'll make it a grid with 3 columns. Just add in a random gap size. So for each column, I'm just going to add a paragraph text with, this paragraph. So in this case, this is what it says. Let me just double check the size using our size plugin, 16 pixels, which is fine. And then I'm gonna select the paragraph element and duplicate it, and then just copy the rest of these items. Copy that, we'll copy that, and we'll copy that. Now let's preview and see how that looks. And that looks pretty similar to how it looks here. The only difference is, in this case, this goes to 2 lines. So you could do this in 2 ways. You could add a maximum width, or the easiest way is also to just, within the text itself, just press enter to add it to a new line. So that's what we're gonna do, because that's just very straightforward. And then we're going to add our bottom row elements. So we're going to add another div, and now we'll call this bottom row. So in this case, we're going to use, I mean, we could use grid, we could use flex. I'll start with flex. I'll just give a gap of 2 rem. So we have 2 things here, the heading and the button. So I want to confirm the size of this, which is 210 pixels. We'll open up our pixel to rem converter. Oops, which I hope is working. Oh, is it not? Oh my gosh, our go-to pixel to rem converter is not working, which is terrible. But fortunately, there seems to be, there's another version. So very good. So we're gonna add in 210 pixels, calculate. Okay, that's like 13.15 rem. So I just want to confirm like which size. That's not our H1, so maybe it's our H2. Okay, so that's our H2. So that's just what I wanted to confirm. And the first text says book. So we're going to double click that and write book. Then we're gonna add a button, give it the style of button, and that says book now. Oops. And then here it should say dawn. Okay, so in our CTA section, I'm also going to set the overflow to hidden. I'm actually curious. Okay, because since the heading is actually super huge, it kind of goes on smaller screens. So if I resize the screen, right, it's gonna go off screen. And so I was curious how the live site was doing it. But they seem to be shrinking the text, kind of like how we did with the hero. So we're probably gonna do the same thing. But before we do that, we are just going to make sure that these 2 elements are spread out. Right now they're right after one another. So if we select our component, and here where it says top, which means they kind of appear after another from the top, we're gonna change that to space between. So that basically just creates that gap between the elements. So now if we preview, um, this looks like it's good enough. The only other thing is I want to center this as well. So we're going to like select this center alignment. Then we're going to preview again, and that looks pretty good. So the last thing that I want to do is probably decrease the padding, because I think the padding right now is a bit much. So selecting our padding vertical, we're going to choose like maybe just extra large. And then we're gonna make sure that that doesn't affect here and here. And then if we preview, that looks pretty good. The only difference now is I wanna make sure that size-wise, it still looks good. So we're gonna make it a bit higher. Now that we decrease the padding, the overall section becomes smaller. So we just need to select our CTA component and we can increase this. Like let's try 70 VH and we'll see how that looks. I think it's still a bit small, so we can even do like 70. We're gonna do like 73 and we'll see how that looks. Um, that looks pretty good, but I'll probably just go up to 74. So this should be fine. And then the other thing I want to do is, so we've used this I'm curious where else we've used this, because I'm trying now to decide if I want the text to like resize as we shrink the screen. If I go back to my hero heading, you'll see that we gave it VW. That's why I had to give this a class, right? So I'm curious where else we have used H2, because I wanted, okay, the only other place we've used it is here. So when it says two on this page, they basically mean these are the two elements we've used here. If you had a bigger site and you were trying to figure out where your classes have been used, you can go to the style selector here, type the name of the class, in this case H2, click this and it'll tell you this is how many times you've used this element on this page, and these are the other page you've used this element, these are the components you've used this element in. So in this case, we've only used it on this page and in the style guide. Obviously, those are the only two pages we have. So cool. So in that case, then um I'm once again trying to decide if I should give it a class or if I should just I'll probably just give it a class because I can imagine if we are using this size anywhere else, we'll probably have to do the same thing. So here, instead of 13 rem, what we're going to do is I'll give it a combo class for now, honestly, VW, right? We're going to change it from rem to VW. So rem, and then I'm just going to increase it to match this size-wise. So 16 seems to be fine. So we'll see. Okay, but the problem with VW is if it looks good on your screen where you're editing, you can also imagine that it will be too large on the larger screen. So we have to kind of adjust for that. So let's say 12. Yeah, 12 VW seems to be good. So in this one too, I'm gonna give it that combo class and then 12 VW. So now if I resize, the text resizes with it as opposed to going off. So the only other thing I want to edit is this image. So right now we set it to 150, but I think that's too big. So we want to make it a bit smaller. And actually, we probably will adjust how that image section works next week. I am curious if it's just that image. Okay, it's just that image. What I was looking into is you notice with this image, as you scroll down, the image is like moves up. And then as you scroll up, the image moves down. That's called the parallax effect. It's pretty common. So in order to get this effect, we can't really use the image as a section background because we need to target the image element. It would have to be its own separate image, layer, which is fine. But since we're not doing interactions this week, I'm gonna just leave it as it is, but just something to make note that we also want to add this parallax effect. So for now, let me leave it as it is. I'll just adjust it. So instead of 140, it's like maybe 130. So it's not that zoomed in. Even 130 seems too zoomed in. It actually might be 100 like we thought. Okay, 100 seems too zoomed out. So let me try 110. Yeah, 110 seems to be where we want it to be. So you'll notice the final thing before we're done with this section is on my preview, this text seems to be like, it's in the middle, but it's like taking up less space compared to, the example. It's not stretched out, also compared to this. And that's because in our component, we sent it to align in the middle, which means by default, any element in it is going to be within the middle. So in this case, with this bottom row, right, the text increases in size and decreases in size. So it's always going to take up the full space it needs to take up. But with this text, it's not going to do that because, it's just three paragraph elements. So in those cases where you're like, why is this element not taking up the full width of its container? The easiest fix is to just go to the width and then give it 100%. So now you can see it stretches to fill the container as we would want it to, right? So that's good. Now we're pretty much done with this section. So we're going to go to the next section, which is where we have this form. So I'm just going to, once again, I'm going to duplicate the list section and I'm just going to give it a name called form section. And then here where it says bottom, I'm going to change that to vertical because now we need padding on the top and the bottom and extra huge. And then I'm going to delete the component that we have. Gonna delete it and then add our own new one, which is called form components. So this is going to be two grids, very straightforward. So we're gonna give it a grid and we'll just do like 4 REM for the spacing for now. Then we're going to do our left column. So form left column. And in this case, it's going to be this heading here and this image. So I'll just give it flex vertical in a gap of 2 rem for now. And I'll add in our heading. So the other thing I actually forgot to do here, which I even talked about before, is I left this as H1. I remember we said we could only have one H on element on the page. Actually, even if you go to this error section here, um, oh, I love how it tells me I haven't, like, it doesn't tell me anything about having multiple H1s. Well, Webflow might not tell you, but it's not good practice. So I'm just going to change that to H2. It doesn't affect anything because I'm using classes, but it's just for the HTML tag, right? Same thing in this case. It's going to be H2 because it's a new heading in this section. And then we can just pick the size we want using classes. So in this case, the size of this is 45 pixels, which can't remember if we use 45 exactly or not, but 45 pixels is around 2.8. So we're gonna select this and we're going to, let me try heading 4. Heading 4, it's still pretty big. Let's try heading 6. Heading 6 is 2 rem, which is, okay, so it's H5. I was curious if we specifically had the right sizing. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to copy this text, add it in there, and then I'm also going to add this image. So form image, right? And then I'm just going to give this image 100%, 100%, and then cover. So in selecting the image, don't think this is an image we've seen before. So once again, I have to inspect. And fortunately, this image is pretty easy to find. So it's right here. So we're going to drag it to our desktop and then going back, we're going to drag it to our assets panel and then wait for that to load in and select it. So with this image selected, the sizing is a bit smaller. So we'll just go in, select the parent layer here, and we'll decrease to, I think it's like 50% or something like that. We'll leave it like that for now, right? We'll come back to that. Next thing we want to do is add our form. So we're going to add a form block. We can give it a class of form block. I don't want to say form block. That's weird. So we'll just call it form block and we'll just call this form, right? So we have, okay, interesting. We have these name sections, email. Oh, we have like these are checkboxes actually. So they don't have the traditional checkbox look, but these are, since you can select multiple, they are checkboxes. And we have a message field. So let's start building out this form. The first thing I'm noticing are these field labels. So instead of giving it a class, I'm just going to um, edit all field labels. So in this case, the field labels are supposed to be 16 pixels and the height is supposed to be normal. So in this case, we're going to set the height to normal and it's already 16 pixels by default, which is 1 REM. So we can leave it like that. The other thing I'm also curious of is if we want to, I'll leave the spacing. By default, labels have like a margin spacing at the bottom of 5 pixels. I'll probably just leave that for now. So we have this name field, name required. Um, so I'm just gonna copy that. Well, I guess I didn't need to copy it. I could just say name required. And then if I really wanted to, I could give this a combo class because it's supposed to be gray. Okay, I was curious if we had a gray class. So we do. It's called alternate. So that's our first section. And then we actually have this label. And then right below it, we have a grid, which has these two form fields. Oh, I'm just going with my laptop. So we're going to do that next. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a div block and I'm going to call this form grid, right? grid, and then we'll say one rem is pretty good, and we only need one row. So within this grid, I am going to add in two columns because you want one column with for the first name and one column for the last name. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that. And I'm going to duplicate my field label again, add it here. And I'm just going to drag this text field and add it here. Oops, add it within my form column element. I'll delete this other text field for now. The other thing I also want to do is make sure to add this spacing. So we'll add a spacing, we'll give our form flex vertical, and we'll just add a spacing of 1 rem. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to give it our form input. I think when we were customizing, okay, we didn't. I was curious when we were customizing our style guide if we customized our form already, but we didn't. You can see this is like just a traditional form. So here, the way they've done it is there's only a border at the bottom. And also, as you hover, the border is grayish. Actually, is it grayish? Yeah. The border is grayish, and then as you hover, it like increases in thickness. It's very subtle, but you can see it if you zoom in, that animation. And then also when you click, it becomes white. So we're not doing animations today. So I'm just going to leave that as it is. But I'm going to remove the border that's everywhere and only put a border at the bottom. And our border, we'll give it that, we'll use gray because that's already in our style guide. And now you can see that it's just the one line. The other thing I want to do is remove the padding because here, if you type, you can see that it starts typing from the beginning. Here, if I type, because there's padding, it's going to start typing like that. Also, it turns red, but that's just because of the default animation it's come with. We can adjust that. So I'm going to decrease the padding to 0, 0. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the margin because I don't want that. So in this case, this is supposed to be first name, right? And last name. Okay. The other thing, okay, I was curious if the spacing between these is equal, which it is. It's just that the spacing here is supposed to be a bit larger between these two columns. So maybe it's supposed to be like 6 rem, right? So we're gonna go and add in that. I'm gonna remove this input field and I'm just gonna duplicate this one. So actually I don't need to because the rest of them are all single, 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 single. So we're gonna duplicate one form column and we're going to add it to our form. And we're gonna move it up above the button. So now this is for our email, which once again has this required um, setting. And then after email, we have project description. So also by default, your forms have margins at the bottom. You can see here. So I also want to remove those because I don't really want them. And then once those are removed, I might increase, actually the spacing is probably fine. So I'll leave that as it is. So below email, we have project description. Okay. And then below project description, we have our budget. So I'm going to select our form and add in our checkboxes. And actually, those should also be in a form column. So I'm going to duplicate this first, remove the input field that was there before, and instead add checkboxes. So we went through checkboxes, I believe, when we were doing the forms. So this should be something that you remember, but we want a custom checkbox, right? So we're gonna select custom. And then here, the way they've had it is you don't have an actual, checkbox, but rather this whole thing is a checkbox. And yes, it is possible to create this um, as you see it here. So this also has similar animation to the form, the input fields where the border becomes thicker on hover, and then when it's selected, it's white. So we're going to create that. How do you create that? Well, a number of different ways. One way is you're limited in what you can do with the checkbox. This icon. This is the icon that people have to select in order for the checkbox to be selected. So that's something to keep in mind, right? You can't, if you delete this, you delete the whole checkbox. So this is the key item here. And then you also cannot put text in this item. It's not like a div or anything like that. So the easiest thing to do is to apply the settings that you want. And I'm actually going to put this in another div because it's supposed to be in like a row. And I'm gonna call this form checkboxes, right? And I'll just give them flex one REM. So now with our checkbox field selected, let me just use the default checkbox options that they came with. So we have form checkbox, here we have checkbox icon, and these are all from the style guide, by the way, and checkbox label, right? So with our checkbox item selected, I'm going to give this 100%, oops, 100%, and I'm going to remove the border that it has, right? I'm going to remove this margin here, and we're going to make this absolute. Before we do that, we're going to select the checkbox container itself, and we're going to make it relative because we want our checkbox to be absolute um, to this container here, as opposed to the whole page. So with that set to relative, I can now make this absolute, and I can have it fill. So you can see now it fills this whole container, right? And then for our label, I'm going to double check the sizing of this. Okay, it's 14 pixels. So I am going to go in and adjust this. So it's 14 pixels. Last thing I'm going to do is also add this spacing. There's a gap. So we need to add that border first of all, which is this one rim. And then we had a slight border as well. So let's start with 0.5 and we can adjust. 0.5 is a bit big. It's a bit smaller than that. So let's try like 0.2 and see how that looks. 0.2 is a bit better. It's just that the spacing on the left and the right seems to be a bit larger. So we're gonna increase that to like 0.4. I think that looks pretty good. So let's copy this. Um, I don't have the euro symbol on my thing by default, so I'm just copying it from here on my keyboard, I meant to say. So now with that selected, you can see here if I try to double click to get to the text, I can't because the checkbox icon is on top, which is what we want. So you have to select it from the layers panel, I mean. So now with that selected, I can adjust that. Then let's duplicate this. I guess like 5. So this is now 5,000 to 10,000 euros. So we'll select our second one and we'll say, is it 5,000 to 10,000? So 10,000 euros. Yep. And then with that selected, I'm going to select my third one and I'm going to make this, that's 10,000 to 15,000. Okay. And then select the next one, paste. Okay, that's the last one, which is 15,000. So we don't need this. Okay. And then we don't need the last one. So these are the 5 different ones that we have. Okay. So this is called project budget. Um, and then these are our options, which is fine. The gray, I don't think is dark enough. So we're actually going to go into our variables. And here where it says light gray, we're gonna just make it a bit darker. Because right now it's not dark enough. I still think it's probably not dark enough. So let's go back into our variables and make it slightly darker. Not by much, but just a bit. And maybe that's fine for now. So that's good enough. We'll leave it as it is. The last field that we want is um, this text area field. So we're going to add a new column. I duplicated it. And this time this is just going to be called message. And I'm going to delete this checkbox wrapper and instead add in our text area. So keep in mind, this is not a normal field. It's an area field. So we're going to give it the input tag. And then we're going to give it the combo class of is text area because that's what we want. And none of these fields have any placeholders, so we're just gonna delete the placeholder there. I'm gonna increase, I mean, the spacing in this form a bit more and make maybe 1 to 5. And the last thing we're gonna do is just give our submit button um, the proper styling. So we're gonna give it the button styling, and I think we should have a combo class. Okay, we don't actually. The submit button is like unique because the other buttons are like rounded, so we don't actually have styling for it. Let me confirm is secondary is okay. So we do have is form submit, but now we just need to adjust the styling. So in this case, the radius, there's no radius and there's no background unless you hover over it. So we can say the background is green, or really the ideal way to do it is that the background is transparent. And then you can even go in and add like a transparent, like save this as a variable, right? And then we have a border for it, right? Which is white, and our text is also white. The size of this should be 1 rem, 16 pixels. So we'll leave that as it is. And the padding is also probably fine as it is. The only other thing is that it's not bold, but rather it's normal. Now, if we don't want our button to be taking up all that space, we can select our form, and here you can see where it's stretch alignment, and just click that. So now it's aligned to the left. But you'll see that affects everything else. So really, um, we can undo that and instead select our button. The way to fix this, by the way, is to just give all of these with 100%, and that's fine. Or the alternate way is if it's only one element that you want to not stretch, you can just target that element. And then here, where because there's flex child settings as well, you can just select this alignment. The only thing to keep in mind with this is that it'll affect. So if you use this anywhere else on the page, it'll affect that. So if you don't want it to affect every other time you've used this, then you would have to give it another combo class. In this case, we just have one form, so it doesn't matter. Um, and then the sizing of the form is a bit smaller from what we had. So I'm just going to say 1 rem, 1 rem, and that should be good. The last thing I'm going to do is this is also flex stretch. So we're going to go in and I mean flex space between, right? But it also extends past the form itself. So right now, if I preview, you can see it ends where the form ends. But in this case, it's supposed to end a bit more than that. So we can go in here and we can select that and just give it a margin, like maybe 5%. Actually, 5 rem. Will that work? Probably not. Okay, so that doesn't work. Let's try another way. Okay, we can do it this way, which is interesting. The only downside with using it this way is that it's not going to add more spacing here, which is a bit annoying, but we can find a way to adjust that. So let's try and see, is this good enough? Or does it need a bit more spacing? I think a bit more, like maybe -6 should be good. And then because we've added this -6, we can select our form component and just give it more spacing, because at the end of the day, you still want there to be spacing with the footer. So that's why you just want to make sure. Um, Actually, I want to confirm something here. We might go in and adjust that later, but for now, this looks good and looks pretty similar. With our checkboxes, you'll see actually when we click them, it has that weird effect, and that's because we haven't customized the checked state. So maybe let's go and do that. So the check state resets our sizing. So right now I'm holding Option on Mac, but I think on Windows it will be Alt. And I'm selecting these so that it removes the custom settings that were there before. I want the width and the heights to still be 100%. I don't want this to change from before. I don't want this image color. Actually, the image. So for the image itself, hmm, I wonder if you can actually. Okay, let me remove that, and I'm gonna set this to transparent. I don't know if there's a way to like remove this default image that's there, because that's very annoying. Can I just give it a color? Okay, amazing. I can just give it a color of transparent. Because checkboxes by default come with that icon, if you don't want the icon at all, then you have to come find a workaround. So that's why I've added transparent in the color, but because the image, I mean, I can even remove this. Well, no. So I added transparent in the background color, but also in the image itself. So with when you select image and gradient, there's image, there's gradient, and then there's also just solid color, right? Radius, I'm also going to remove that. Okay, and then that's pretty much it. The only thing is that actually when you select it, it's supposed to turn white, right? Um, which we can do, but then of course that makes our text disappear. But we will find a workaround for that next week. But for now, just for the sake of completing this page, we'll leave that as it is. And then we'll go back to none. And I forgot to actually remove the radius here, right? So now when we click it, probably nothing will happen. The only thing that will happen is this outline, and that's there for accessibility reasons. Just to kind of emphasize when you have a checkbox selected, there should be outline settings. So you can also usually remove those by double confirming that there's no border and no outline when your checkbox is checked. So now if we go back to done, oh, okay, it's still there. Maybe it's a focus state. Oh, it is a focus state. So this blue dot actually gives you an indicator that in the focus state, there is also some adjustment. So once again, it adjusts my width and height. So I have to reset that. It adjusts my radius. I have to remove that. And this is where that shadow is coming from. So I can remove the shadow completely. Now, if I preview, you can see that the shadow only appears here, which is honestly great. But we'll come back to that, right? The last thing I want to finish off before we're done for today is this footer, which is like pretty similar to our hero. So I actually might just duplicate the hero section, and our footer is outside our main wrapper. It's not in our main wrapper. So I'm gonna duplicate the hero section, and I'm gonna instead call this footer section. And the only image that we have here is this one image, which we actually don't even have here, to be fair. Do we have this image anywhere else? Okay, we do. We have it here. So it should be in our assets. So the heading itself, I think is, actually, I think it's bigger than the hero heading. This is 270 pixels. If I calculate that, that's like 16 rem. We're probably gonna, yeah, we're gonna still use what we were using before because we were using BW, which is what we want. So we're gonna leave that as it is. The only thing here is adding these links, which are positioned very weirdly, I will say. I don't know who did the positioning for this site. So we just need one image. I'm just gonna delete all these other ones. And here I'm just gonna call this footer image, right? It's gonna be at the bottom right, but it's gonna be moved up. And the ratio for it is kind of portrait, so like 2.5. And we're going to update what image it is. So in this case, it is this image. We're gonna move it a bit lower. It's a bit too high. And it's actually gonna be overlapping on top of the image. So we're going to give it a Z index of 1 to make sure that it's on top of the image. So now if we preview, ooh, it's a bit too, we might give it a fixed size. Okay, it doesn't have a fixed size. So it's just too big. So we can decrease this to like, let's say 14. I want to confirm the size on my screen. Okay, 14 is pretty good. It just needs to be moved to the left a bit more. So maybe like 30%. Oops. So now if I look at 30%, that looks pretty good. So we're gonna leave that as it is. And then the next thing we want to do is add in this paragraph. Um, the other thing I also want to see is, okay, yeah, we're gonna add in this paragraph element. So let me add in this footer links div here. And because I don't want to make this absolute as well, we can probably just leave it as it is and just align it. So it's supposed to be on the right. Um, you can actually, so we can actually put this in a padding, as crazy as it sounds. So we can give this padding global. We can give this a container, right? And we can add our footer links in there. We can even add in our heading in there to be fair. And then within that, we can actually give this a component and add both of these in here. So now that that's in here, I'm just gonna make sure that this is flex vertical. And now here is our footer links. I'm also going to select this component and I'm gonna give it a gap because it's supposed to have a gap. Okay, that's the thing I didn't want because actually this is probably fine. I thought the heading was centered because as soon as you give it a gap, the heading is not centered anymore. But in the case of the footer, it's not centered, so it still works out. So now that that's set up, we can give this a grid alignment. Let's just give it spacing of 3 rem, and we're gonna add in our 2 columns. So we're just gonna call it footer column, make them flex alignment, 3 rem, and then so we have a heading here of 26 pixels, and then we have these links. So I'll give it a heading element. So this one, remember, is not H2, but I mean, not H1, but H2. And then the next headings are H3. I don't actually know if we have a, so we have 2 rem, which is, so if I go here and I calculate 26, that's the same as 1.625. So it's smaller than the 2 rem we have, which is fine. We can actually give it like an extra, a text size large size instead, which is still not exactly what we want. And I kind of want to match what we need, which is 1.625. So what I can do is I can just give it its own unique class, footer column heading, right? And then I can say this is 1.625. So this first one says sitemap. Oops. So I'm trying to select my text and I can't because it is behind this hero gallery. So one thing you can do is actually select this, give this hero gallery an events none. I don't think we covered events none. I can't remember. But when you give any element events none, it makes the element unclickable. So you cannot interact with the elements, even in preview. So now, if I try and, for example, before when I clicked, I was selecting the gallery because it covers the whole section. Now when I click, I can select everything else because the gallery is set to hidden none. You can still select it from the layers panel to adjust it, but you won't be able to click on it or interact or interact with it. So it's really useful in depending on the kind of site you're building, but you tend to use it a lot. So now I can select my heading and I can call this sitemap. And then I'm going to add a new div block, and this will be for our footer links, right? And we're once again gonna give this vertical flex, and we're gonna add a text link element now. So in this case, we have bio, portfolio, and awards. So starting with bio, I'm gonna call this bio, and we're gonna give this a footer link setting. We want this text to be white. This color is by default, by the way. So you just have to give it its own color. I think the size is probably 1 rem, which is what we want. So the only thing we really wanted to change is just the color. So now with that selected, I can duplicate it. So we have portfolio and we have awards. Then I'm going to duplicate my footer column again, right? The reason I was doing that is because I don't like that they're squished together, but they are squished together because I gave them this alignment because I needed them to start on the right. So I think one thing I'm going to do is I'm probably just going to give this like 50%. 50% is probably too much. I think it's like 30, 40. So now it's going to be 40% of its container, which stretches it out a bit more. And then this is going to be contact. We have here email, Instagram, and X. Okay. Now if we preview, actually we can make it smaller, 30% probably. We can see this is how it looks, which is what we want. This we're gonna probably decrease to like 35. And then this image, where's our image? We're gonna move up a bit more. Oops. To like maybe 20. And now we can see it overlaps. The only other thing that we want to do here at the end is here, remember we added this padding. We probably actually don't need to add that padding anymore because if you can see from the example, we kind of need this image peaking a bit. So I removed the padding to see if that's enough. It is not. So second thing we can do now is decrease the size of this form section. By default, let me see here. Oh, sorry, this is the footer. It's 100 VH. I think this is a bit smaller than 100 VH, like 80 VH maybe. Okay, yeah, 80 VH seems to be correct because now we can actually see this form peeking in. So that's great. Okay, so perfect timing. We are at an hour, so we'll finish here. But today we managed to finish the page. So we have our hero section, our intro section, this image grid here. We have our list here, our drop downs, right? Here we have our CTA section. We have our form section here, and then we have our footer. So these are all the same sections that we have on our example. We'll finish things off here for today. Next week, we will build out, actually next week, let me even select what page we're gonna build out. Okay, I don't want to do their image, weird image gallery. I'm trying to see if they have any other interesting page. Okay, they have this awards page, which is just an image and then these two paragraphs, and that's it. And they have this bio page, which is pretty okay. So maybe we'll next week we'll build out. I want to build a simple page because I want to focus on adding number one, making the site responsive, and then also adding the interaction. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to do all of that. Hence why I don't want to build another complicated page. So next week we're going to actually start off with making this homepage responsive and then adding in the interactions. And then we'll see how much time we have left if we have enough time to also build the awards page. But the idea is to finish things off and show you guys how to get your site ready for publishing and like fine tune all those details. So we're going to be focusing on that next week. But otherwise, I think we are good for today. Doreen, let me stop sharing actually. Did you have any questions for today?
No, no. But there is
Yes.
uh, on my website, the one that I am doing for my project. I think I'll share it tomorrow. Progress till where I've reached, but I've noticed like the kind of website that I chose, it has a lot of content. So
Mm-hmm.
what the idea that I had is that every heading that is bolded, that is, you see like those H1 to H6, I don't know, they call them
Mm-hmm.
tags, right?
Yes.
Yes, so I used up all of them and still there
Yeah.
are not enough. So I
Mm.
went to ChatGPT. I asked like, is that okay? They talked about SEO. I don't know Google. I mean
Mhm.
ranking. So they said like
Mhm.
H1 should be in any just one in that particular page, and then
Mhm.
H2 should be like for headings of the section, and then
Mhm.
H3 for those minor.
Mhm.
Now, what about paragraph? Because like I think
Mm.
I'll send it tomorrow. You'll see. There are
Mm.
some. There are two fonts that one was specifically for heading and
Mhm.
another one specifically for paragraphs. And then
Mhm.
for paragraph has varying sizes. How do you address that? Same case for the heading. If it was you, how would you approach that? I don't know if you've gotten my question.
I think I kind of have, but I think also if I see it,
Mm-hmm.
then it
Yeah,
will help.
sure.
You send
Can
with
I
like a
send it
normal.
here? Wait,
Okay.
wait.
Mhm.
Let me try. Let me try to search it here. Mm, okay. Oh my god. I don't think I can see it. Anyways, I'll send it. It will short video. I'll
You
send it
send it?
tomorrow if they walk to. Yeah, yeah. It
Okay.
it
All
has
right.
a lot of content. and a lot of animation. I don't know what was I thinking. It's too much.
Okay, no worries. You'll send it tomorrow, and then also send a loom. Either write out the problem, or send like a
Ye-
loom video.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
and then I
okay, sure,
can get back to you. So,
okay.
okay, guys, let me end here. Let me stop recording.